I don't have a headache. I'm just preparing. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Just Another Struggling Writer, the beleaguered author's one-stop shop for commiseration and, hopefully, inspiration. My name is Kerry Share, and I am just another struggling writer. For today's video, I am doing the first in a new book review series, which I am calling Behind the Bandwagon. If you remember from my introductory video all the way back in July, you'll recall that I mentioned that I'm not actually very well read in my favorite genre of fantasy. I pretty much didn't read at all in my 20s. I was more focused on playing video games and laying around like a bum. So I missed a lot of classic fantasy that came out in the late 2000s and 2010s. And I'm really just now starting to catch back up. So I thought it would be fun to go back and look at a lot of hit favorites from those times and read them myself and see what my thoughts are on them and if they hold up. So I've set some criteria for the books I'll be reading for this review series. They have to be 5 or more years old, have at least 100,000 ratings or more on Goodreads, and hold a rating of 4 stars or higher. And those are pretty strict rules. Not every book can maintain that 4-star or higher. But like I said, I want to be focusing on books that everybody was reading and everybody was loving. For today's video, I will be reviewing A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. Assisting me on today's video is the remainder of this bottle of wine, because in order to talk about this book, I feel like I need to be at least a little bit drunk. So, if you're like me and haven't read this book, or at least I hadn't until just now, you may not know what this book is about. Well, ostensibly, it is about a woman named Diana Bishop, who is a witch descended from a long line of powerful witches, one of whom was very famously executed during the Salem witch trials. But she is a person, a witch, who does not want magic. She disdains her magic. She avoids it. She's kind of afraid of it. And she just wants to go about her life as an ordinary person. However, her life is disrupted when she accidentally summons a book that was thought to be lost, a book under a very powerful enchantment controlled by other witches. This book supposedly contains secrets about the creation of witches, vampires, and the third kind of creature in this universe, demons. And when she summons it, all hell breaks loose because, again, the book was thought to be lost. No one was supposed to be able to find it. And the fact that she was able to summon it raises all kinds of questions. Diana, having avoided magic her whole life, not knowing the significance of the book, reads it or studies it because she's a historian and sends it back. This is apparently the wrong thing to do because later on she's not able to get it back, which again raises the question, why was she able to summon it when it had been thought to be lost for so long, when it was under very powerful enchantment? And how did she meet the criteria to get that book? That is the question posed pretty much in the first couple of chapters, and by the end of 600 pages, that question was never answered. So as I mentioned, our main character is Diana Bishop, powerful witch, even more powerful than even she realizes, as we learn as the book goes on. And Diana is one of the most insufferable main characters I have ever read, primarily because she is a super special snowflake in a world of super special snowflakes. She is, again, a very powerful witch, descended from very powerful witches. But as we learn it around the midpoint of the book, not only is she powerful, but she actually has access to pretty much every single type of magic known to man at this point, including some kinds of magic that were thought to have died out. She can summon all of the elements, she can fly, she can time travel, as we later learn, but she doesn't want any of it. She doesn't care about magic. Ever since her parents died in a grisly ordeal when she was 7, she's never really wanted it. Because of course, someone who is literally genetically predisposed to have all the power they could ever ask for at their disposal just doesn't want it, okay? Because she's just too good of a character to want that kind of power. She just wants to be an ordinary person, and oh my God, could I want to stab myself in the eye with a fork even more? Enter Matthew Claremont. Matthew is a vampire, a very old, very powerful vampire, and he falls in love with Diana at first sight. From the very first moment But he sees her use just a tiny little spell to get a book off a very high shelf, and she's so embarrassed about it because she doesn't want to use her magic, and she keeps a running tally of how many times she has to use her magic in her head so she can chastise herself later. Oh, that right there is the reason that he loves her. And literally the first time we were in his perspective in like chapter like 3 or 4 or 5, really early on, he is already like running off to his best friend and saying that he's falling in love with her, despite having had maybe 2 conversations with her. So when I said this book is really Twilight for adults, that's what I mean. The plot, ostensibly about the book and the hellstorm that Diana sets off by summoning it, is basically entirely irrelevant. It's really just an excuse, a cover story for the rest of the 600 pages, which is Matthew and Diana's relationship. Because in this world, vampires and witches are at odds, they are fighting all the time, and for some reason, love between them is forbidden. That doesn't matter to our main characters because they just love each other so much, despite having only known each other for a couple of weeks. They are absolutely, ride or die. We know that because Deborah Harkness literally spends every single page, every single character motivation, every single plot point goes back to Diana and Matthew's relationship. Not a single sentence, not a single word is wasted on anything else that does not directly tie back to her relationship with Matthew. And that's fine if that's what you're into, but it is not a good story. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. It's not good. There was absolutely no climax. Anytime there was any sort of action at all, it is over and done with within a chapter, no more than 10 or 12 pages. Literally at around the 60% mark, 65%, when you would think the third act is going to start, we have one exciting moment where another vampire comes to attack Matthew and ostensibly kill him because of his liaison with Diana. And it's over with, literally over with in less than a chapter. And the remaining 150 pages is all just about deciding their next move into going into the next book. And it is so fucking boring. It is so boring. I can't believe there were 3 more books after this, because if I had to read another 50 more pages of them just making moon eyes at each other and, listening to other characters fawn over them and promise them that they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that they can be together, and they're going to fight the good fight and fight off the congregation of witches that are like adamant that they can't be together and all this stuff. I swear to God, I was going to jump off a very tall something. It was so awful. These are the 2 most pretentious characters I have ever had to read 600 pages about. Like I said, we've got Diana, who is not just one of the most powerful witches in the world, able to access all kinds of magic, but she's also some kind of super genius who graduated from high school at 16 and went on to get a tenureship at Yale before she was 26, and is now a doctor who is at Oxford and working on, ancient manuscripts. And she's also a rowing expert and a runner. And oh, of course, she can ride horses, something we learned right in the middle of the book. She's so brave. We can't forget that, how they harp on how brave and fierce she is. And every single character who meets her, who ostensibly wouldn't like her, like Matthew's mother, who is another vampire, who has a long, ugly history with witches and is said to have hate witches and wouldn't even allow her in her home. By the end, they are talking like mother and daughter-in-law and loving on each other, and it's only been like a couple of weeks. Okay, great, but everyone falls in love with her, and even everyone falls in love with Matthew, even though he's a vampire who kills people and all this stuff. Every single person in this book who's not an outright antagonist is just lining up to be the cannon fodder for these 2 characters. Apart from not being realistic, which I know this is a fantasy story about vampires and witches, but Jesus Christ, come on. These people have lives that don't revolve around you. And that's not even getting into the misogyny of the story, because despite the fact that Diana is supposed to be this strong, independent woman, the instant Matthew comes into her life, she just folds like a house of cards. At one point, he is like chastising her because she mounted a horse by herself, and he was like insistent that he help her mount it, despite the fact that she was a horse rider as a kid and had done like all kinds of equestrians. Like, he was upset with her for not letting him help her onto a horse. And then later on, his mother makes her ride side saddle and she talks about how much she likes it. All these things, and like they talk about how vampires are fiercely protective and territorial. And it's just like, if he pissed on her, it would have made perfect sense for this book, for the way it was written. And this is all supposed to be nice and good and healthy. And it felt like it was written 50 years ago, not 10. I tried to DNF this book at 43% when I realized that I wasn't going to get anything else. In fact, it was right after we learned that not only is Diana a super powerful witch, and not only is she's some kind of super genius who is also a great at yoga and running and rowing, but she also, of course, knows all about horses too. And I was just like, I can't do it anymore. I can't listen to a whole, because I was listening to it on an audiobook at the time. I can't listen to an entire chapter of them just riding off into the countryside on horses and just talking about their relationship, because that's all this book was. That's all this book was. It was just, it would be like 250 pages of just their romance, and then 20 pages of something to do with the rest of the plot, and then 250 more pages of relationship stuff. If I'm being serious, if I had to go through and tally up the pages where actual plot things were happening, it would probably take up less than 50 pages of this 580 page book. And I'm sorry, I just wanted to throw up and die. And if it wasn't for this video review series, I would have DNF'd it, because, oh my gosh, it is so insufferable. It is so insufferable. I don't understand how she went on to write 3 more books of equal or even lengthier, size about this relationship. I just can't. What more do you have to say? Oh, but of course, in true Twilight fashion, Matthew won't have sex with her, even though they're married. But his excuse is because they have all the time in the world, and having sex should be about intimacy, not need. And I just wanted to gouge my eyes out, because God, how pretentious can you be? And second of all, you have all the time in the world. Your lover is not a vampire and can't live forever. Give her what she fucking wants, you fucking weirdo. Oh yeah, Matthew is a wine expert, which is the other reason why I felt wine was appropriate for this video. They spend like an ungodly amount of time talking about ancient wines and the taste of wine that was casked 1,000 years ago and whatever. So pretentious. A lot of the first part of this book takes place at Oxford and amongst these really ancient and historically important locations, and then they go off to a French villa, a chateau, where they have all these open fields and the horses and towers, and I'm sure that appeals to some people. Obviously, it appeals to a great deal of people, or we wouldn't be here. I'm sorry, I just want something more from a 600-page book. And I mean, like, they fall in love so fast. Like, by like the first 125 pages, it's pretty clear that they are like, he's been in love with her since the beginning, but like she resisted it a little bit longer. So then like the rest of the book is all them just like being moon-eyed at each other and just saying how much she loves him and how much he is willing to go to any lengths to protect her. And I get it. Like I said, this book was written in 2011, so it was right there in the middle of that post-Twilight craze. I get it to an extent. Okay, let's be honest. I don't actually get it. I never even read Twilight. I've never even seen the movies. I came in right at the end of the Twilight like hype. I always considered myself just to be a little bit too old. I'm 35, so I was like 19 or 20. I aged out of YA faster than the average teen anyway. I missed all of that. I was not even remotely interested. And so a book like this doesn't appeal to me anyway. Well, I picked it up because I thought that there was actual plot. I tried to DNF it when I realized that it didn't. And then I finished it out of pure masochism and for the content. And I woke up the morning after I finished it, and I was just like laying in bed, not wanting to get up. And then I remembered that I finished it and I didn't have to think about it anymore. And I didn't have to listen to it anymore or read it with my eyes, because I listened to the first half on audio and then I finished it on ebook because I literally couldn't listen to it anymore. I needed the ebook so I could skim it, because there was just paragraph upon paragraph upon paragraph of just the same fucking nonsense. So I would just skim it and then read the dialogue and like the description, and anything was basically irrelevant. I mean, it wasn't all terrible. I said in a video a couple days ago that I liked her writing style, Deborah Harkness's writing style. And I think the reason that I thought that was because I had just come off of finishing a couple of YA books. And, YA is just a completely different beast. You can't go into the level of detail that I tend to prefer in adult fantasy, where, you can really explore the world and explore things in detail because of the lower word count and the younger age demographic, whatever. So I think coming off of a couple of YA books and going into an adult fantasy, I was appreciative of Harkness's level of detail. I thought the slow burn in the first part of the book was fine, again, because I thought more was coming. But again, like, that level of detail felt wasted. It just felt wasted because it just, there was no variance whatsoever. At any time an exciting plot element would be introduced, like some sort of problem for the protagonist, it was solved almost immediately. Literally, Diana gets kidnapped by another witch and tortured, to find out information how she summoned the book and like how she became so powerful, like how much magic she has and how they can reclaim it from her and all this stuff. That's an exciting plot element. She's captured, she's whisked away to this remote, crumbling castle and thrown down an oubliette, and that's exciting. I was expecting more from that. I wanted to see her tortured more, to be honest with you. Not just because I loathed her entirely, but because that was something interesting to read about. But of course, in the very next chapter, Matthew solves the problem of where she's at and goes and rescues her with literally no like setback whatsoever. They don't even run into the witch that captured her. They just waltz in, get her out, and leave. It took less than 20 pages to resolve the most exciting plot element of the entire story to that point. And that they duplicated that later on with the other plot point with the vampire coming to kill Matthew, but it's solved in less than a chapter and she's dead. And we spend the last 35% of the book just planning and talking and loving each other, but not having sex because it's about intimacy, not about need, but and just getting ready for the next book, which I cannot imagine spending another millisecond of time on reading any of the other 3 books. So I won't. Where does that leave me? I'm giving this book 1.5 stars. No, I'm giving it 1 star because I don't think there was anything redeemable in it. I mean, the idea was fine. I mean, it had potential, but it literally was so useless to the rest of the book in terms of interesting developments. It may have not, it was basically just a cover story to get these 2 characters together. And it's just like, why bother? Why not just say that they met in the library and fell in love? Why have all this extra nonsense? Or say that she summoned the book by accident, but there are no actual repercussions from that, and just have them go on this adventure to discover the origins and all this stuff. And I think it's probably because she realized that reading 500 pages of Matthew and Diana's relationships with absolutely no conflict whatsoever was a bridge too far. But she like put the barest effort into those conflicts, like the bare minimum effort. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't know how this book has still over 4 stars on Goodreads after 12 years. I don't get how this book went on to have 3 additional sequels. I don't get it. This was obviously not meant for me. If given my druthers and if I didn't need content, I would have DNF'd it at 43% after we learned that, of course, on top of everything else, Diana was an expert horse rider and she was very good at it despite not doing it for years and years and years, and despite not having the money to have a good pair of riding boots going up. Well, then how did they pay for your dressage lessons, bitch? The only saving grace from this book was Diana's Aunt Sarah, who is a lesbian, and with her partner Emily. They were really cool. I mean, for a minute until they just became more supplicants at the altar of Diana and Matthew's relationship. They live in this house, which is kind of like, it's almost a trope nowadays. Maybe it was original when this was first written, but it's kind of like a living house where it's almost its own character. It kind of has a mind of its own. It keeps like moving and shifting and like providing them with things, and at one point it like expands to include room for guests. I wanted to be charmed by that, but it just felt kind of goofy. It just felt, honestly, To be totally honest with you, this book read like fan fiction in that it was centered entirely on a relationship, and that any other sort of plot elements were, pared down as much as can be to make more room for the relationship, and that everything just seemed too convenient. The characters were too powerful, and then you've got like this house that is almost its own character, and it's alive and it can move, and it has its own personality and all this stuff. It just felt, I don't know what the word is for it, but it felt amateurish. I don't know that it fit, and it was like talked about way too late. Like, Diana grew up in this house, and she mentions her backstory several times throughout the book, but it's only when she arrives there right before the climax that we learn that it's like this living house and it has a personality. Like, don't you think that should have been mentioned in the it like I said, just very amateurish, very very fan fictiony, to be honest with you. And I mean, I am a fan fiction person. That's how I really developed my writing, and I have absolutely no qualms against it. But I don't want to pay money to read fan fiction. If I'm paying you money, I would like to be able to read something that has just a little bit more going for it. And this isn't like a knock to the romance genre at all, because first of all, most romance books aren't 700 or 600 pages. And second of all, romance authors know their craft so well that even when you know what's coming, even when the tropes are expected, they can still be played on and toyed with in new and interesting ways. This is not it. This doesn't even have the, third act miscommunication, which I know is very unpopular in certain corners of the romance sphere, but it doesn't even have that. It's like literally a relationship that develops with almost no setbacks, with almost no conflict whatsoever regarding their relationship. It's just like these outside forces make their token attempts to, disrupt them, but it's pretty clear that the author had no interest in developing that side of the story at all. She just wanted to write 500 pages about a witch and a vampire being lovey-dovey. And you just have to give me more than that if you're wanting me to pay you money. I could go on Wattpad and read, something that's 500,000 words for free and probably better written. So, in conclusion, a Mary Sue main character that can do no wrong, and I mean that literally, like no wrong. She does not make any mistakes, and those that do are immediately fixed and, or taken care of, or are actually a help. A love interest who is equally as pretentious, equally as Mary Sue-ish, except he's also a flaming misogynist who can't let women do anything by themselves, and who really denigrates women's ability to, and if he pissed on her like a dog to claim her, it wouldn't have been out of character. And then we have a plot that wasn't a plot, and we had flagrant misogyny that is not just ignored by the protagonist, who is supposed to be the strong, independent woman, but is at times often embraced and cherished. And for that reason, I am giving A Discovery of Witches 1 star, and that star is made out of the bleach that I need to pour on my brain to forget that I ever read it. So that's all from me today. Thank you so much for coming along on my rants. If you liked Discovery of Witches, don't take it personal. I'm not attacking you. We just have different tastes, and that's totally okay. I don't care for this book, but I'm glad that you do. As always, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.